Hi, guys, and welcome to episode 2 of the Definitely Her podcast. I'm joined once again by my CI bestie, Charlotte Young.
Hello, nice to see everybody. Nice to see you again, Kerry.
It's wonderful to have you back with us. Guys, I just want to say that I have the captions on. So if you see me looking down at my screen, that's why I'm looking down. Okay, so I believe Charlotte is going to ask me some questions today. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Better know. Kerry's in the hot seat tonight. Podcast. So Kerry, obviously last time we had a little chat, I told you a little bit about my story, my background. And so I thought roles need to be reversed today. And I want to find out, if you don't mind sharing a bit about your hearing journey and your kind of struggles with hearing loss. Like, where did it all begin?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be happy to share that with you. And when you think, oh my goodness, where do I begin? So I'm going to take it back to the 80s. All right. So I think I was born in 1982, and I must have been around 4 or 5 years old when I caught mumps. And I've heard various stories about this. Lots of my family have different kind of versions of it. But what I do know is that it wasn't really picked up. And so you can imagine when I started school, I remember having my tonsils out. I can remember having some sort of surgery, and I was off school for a while. It was connected to the mumps. And then all throughout school, I remember really, really struggling. I could not hear the teachers. And back then, I was called ignorant. It was coming across as bad behaviour. And I don't think it was till I was round about, I think it was when I was about 9, 10. I remember going for another surgery, and the surgeon said to my mum, "Have you ever noticed Kerry can't hear properly?" And she said, "Yeah, we've really, really noticed that for ages." And he said, "She's got severe hearing loss and she still has mumps present." I think they took my tonsils out. They were supposed to put grommets in because I kept getting reoccurring ear infections.
Mm.
And then next thing I know is it's kind of I'm sort of like going to kind of high school, getting set up with my first pair of hearing aids. And I remember feeling so embarrassed.
Mm.
And I remember I'd lost so much schooling when I was younger due to kind of like my disability going undetected.
Mm.
And I had a lot of adverse childhood experiences, there was a lot of trauma.
Mm.
And then going to high school, that's pressuring anyway, isn't it? And especially when you've got hearing aids.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I remember this lady used to come in and see me at school, and she used to do like speech therapy with me. And she used to do like things like she'd stand behind me and say words and things like that. Speak to my teachers, see how I was getting on. Um, all throughout high school, I really, really struggled. There was a lot of very stressful things going on at home. Um, I remember I can't remember if I lost my hearing aids or I didn't want to wear them. I remember people saying things to me, and they were the NHS big, massive ones then.
Yeah.
And sometimes you had to wear your hair up for PE and so on. I was very conscious.
Mm.
And then I think I must have been about 11 and a half, 12, and the situation at home really escalated. And I ended up going to foster care. And I kind of, I'm not going to say it, well, yeah, I kind of slipped through the net. And I didn't have my hearing aids for quite some time. Then I remember I was living in a different kind of borough. So I
Mm.
went to have a different tests and hospitals. And then I remember it just getting worse. I think I left foster care when I was about 16. And I had my first daughter at 17. And having a baby, and because I'd lost quite high pitched, those are the sounds and the notes I noticed I really, really struggled with.
Mm.
Women's voices, children's voices were very hard. And I remember having a newborn baby, and I really struggled to hear her of a night, and I used
Yeah.
to be so paranoid.
Yeah.
It's very hard, as you know, to sleep when you're hearing aid. Just, you know, you go like that, and all of a sudden they're whistling at me. Um, so I can remember across the years, I just was wearing my hearing aids. It got to the point where things slowly started getting worse. I couldn't use the telephones anymore.
Yeah.
Um, my children kind of become my ears. If we went out shopping, they'd
Mm.
say we're going for the checkout and I didn't hear, and they'd go, oh, my mum's deaf, my mum's deaf. And I loved the way they started to advocate for me, you
Yeah.
know. Um, I think I was always, I lacked a lot of confidence.
Mm.
I was a young mum,
Mm.
had a disability, and this really affected my sense of self-worth, my identity. I remember
Mm.
I've had several jobs. I've worked in the NHS, I've worked in private care, and so many of my managers and employers were just not, they didn't understand.
Mm.
Um, and when you talk about reasonable adjustments, it's, oh, I'll go and sit there. I was like, oh, I'll go and sit there. And I think back then I wasn't really strong enough to advocate for myself. I don't think I fully really accepted I was deaf. I never used to say that word. It was
Yeah.
always I have hearing
Yeah.
loss or I can't hear too well.
Mm.
Deaf is something I've only really said the
Yeah.
past 2 years.
Mm. Yeah.
So I remember getting to a point where I think that I knew my hearing had got so bad, the hearing aids weren't really working. I became kind of a shell of myself and I was really struggling at work. Something really stood out to me. I was working for the NHS and it was a dream career of mine. You know, I'd
Mm.
always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And I used to take bloods, I used to do injections, and sometimes I used to work in little cubicles on ward. It was very patient facing.
Mm.
And I remember one day this doctor said something to me and I asked him to repeat what he said, and he had like a younger doctor there and he said this, didn't you hear him, are you deaf? And I remember being on this ward in front of everybody and I actually said, yeah, I am. And I could feel my chin going. I felt so stupid. And it was so many incidents like that.
Mm.
I remember the hospital I was at. I remember the one day I was, because sometimes you can work at different locations, especially when you're doing vaccinations and
Yeah.
phlebotomy, work in the blood clinics. And I remember working at this one location and they put me in a booth next door to this fan. It was going, and I couldn't hear, it was drowning out the patient's noise. Well, I I said to my manager, this is not working for me. She was very dismissive. You just need to get on with it. So what we can do, you can, I'm sorry. And I remember there was so many incidents like that. And I was so stressed, right? My hair fell out of the sides.
Oh my
I
God.
was really struggling with my anxiety, my mental health. I was like thinking to myself, you know, what kind of life am I going to have? What, you know, it's just getting
Yeah.
worse and worse.
Yeah.
And I remember, even though, you know, we've had the martial arts schools for a long, long time, they're mainly overseen by my husband. And
Mm.
I still wanted that part-time job rather than working fully in the family business. It gave me some independence.
Yeah.
But it got to the point where he said to me, you need to quit your job. You know, I'm really worried about you, your mental health. So I think coming away from that, I was kind of annoyed in a little way. I felt like I should have fought harder and advocate for myself because the
Mm.
NHS prides itself on being an inclusive employer. Now they probably are, but the managers managing the departments are can be very, very toxic, and it can be very hard for a lot of the staff, and even worse for those of us who have a disability. And that's not something it's in the news, we've read about it, so it's quite widely known. It's a toxic environment. So when I started working in the family business full time, I started to get a lot of my confidence back. I was less stressed.
Mm.
But my hearing began to get so bad, I started withdrawing from social situations, going out with my friends.
Yeah.
There'd be many a time my friends would say, oh, let's do this, let's do that, and I'd come up with an excuse because I knew I wouldn't be able to cope in that noisy situation. And I know you get exactly what I mean, you know.
Brilliant.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's just, I remember my mental health got that bad. I remember going to my doctor and saying, this is how I'm feeling. And he wanted to refer me for therapy, telephone therapy. And I'm sat there going, I'm hard of hearing. I can't use the telephone. Oh, he didn't know what to do. And it's constant. It's
Yeah.
like a constant battle all the time to say, I'm deaf. Please don't phone me. Okay, I can't
Yeah.
hear. And it gets to a point where you're absolutely so tired of speaking up for yourself and just speaking up for your needs.
Yeah.
There's one massive incident that really, really stood out to me. It got to have been when my son is 15 now, and he must have been about 2. And I'd moved from the Sandwell area of the West Midlands to Dudley, so different healthcare hospital provider. And even though it was apparently mumps that
Yeah.
sent me deaf, I still didn't know what kind of hearing loss I had. So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask questions. I was having some new tests. I remember him putting this thing down my head to see if I had a blockage. I can't remember if he was a doctor or audiologist, but I remember it being so traumatic, I never went back. And I kept saying to him, I'm getting to the point now where my hearing aids aren't working. What does it look like for me? I'm starting to get worried. I think I might have to give up my job.
Yeah.
And he was very dismissive. I remember him, he wasn't even looking at me when he was talking to me. And I was thinking, you're working in the hearing department, mate. Give me something. And I remember him saying to me, there's not much we can do. It's just going to get progressively worse. And I was like, all right, but what kind of loss is it? I'd like to do my own research.
Yeah.
And I remember getting upset and I remember crying. And I said, I'm just so struggling. I can't remember what I said, but I remember what he said. And he turned around to me and he said, you're not dying, right? You've not got cancer, right? This is not a death sentence. And he was going on about people live great lives, being deaf. And I think I just zoned out. And I remember coming out that room, and my husband was sat outside and he had our son in the pram. And he was like, oh my God, are you all right? And I just cried. I'm absolutely so annoyed with myself now for not reporting that. But I think at the time, I was so mentally broken and low, I didn't report it. So I just lived like that for a very, very long time. And then I remember it was we remember lockdown. That was just horrendous
Yeah.
with the masks and everything
Oh.
like that. I'd gone back. I remember the NHS reached out to all staff who had left to come back and help out with COVID vaccination. So I went back. I had a completely different experience.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I went back. They were amazing. The team I was with, they were very accessible. They empowered me, put adaptions in place. But I remember after COVID going out with my dad, and my dad's very straight talking. I remember him saying to me, your hearing has got so worse now. We need to look at going private. Now, I remember saying to him, Dad, I've had so many audiology appointments, and I've had one probably recently, and they said there's nothing there for me. These are the strongest hearing aids I can get. I'd asked, right? So he said, right, that's it. I'm gonna book you an appointment with a really good ENT that he'd heard of. And I remember it was at the Spire Parkway Hospital in I think it was in Solihull. And I took my audiology reports. Sorry, guys, the ice cream van's outside my house, if you can hear that ringing. But I remember taking my recent hearing test, and he was like, me and my dad went, and I was telling him about everything. I remember being really upset, and then he said, "Kerry, have you heard about cochlear implants?" He went, "I'm not promising anything, but by looking at your hearing test, I think you'd be a fantastic candidate." And he said, "And I've got a colleague, Mr. Richard Irving, who performs these, and I'd like to put you in contact with him." So already I'm feeling there's hope. Okay,
Yeah.
there's hope.
Mm.
And that was round about February. Actually, no, it was. I think it might have been. God, I'm terrible with dates. I think it must have been towards the end of 2021.
Well,
And I remember we booked an appointment with Mr. Richard Ivan. I think it was at the Edgbaston Hospital. He was wonderful. He told me all about it.
wow.
And you know what he said? "I can't believe you haven't been referred to us before." He
Wow.
was quite took back, like, why hasn't your clinic referred us to a, we were expecting to pay private. And he said to me, "You can have this done on the NHS." I
Mm.
was so shocked.
Yeah.
Um, just so shocked. And then I he did say to me, "There's a lot of tests." He explained the process. You've been through it yourself. We had to have all those tests at the hospital, but I'm going to enroll you in the program. We're going to get the ball rolling. He did say to me that I remember he said that he had quite a massive team of surgeons, but if I wanted him, because obviously I'd gone private to him, if I wanted him, I'd be waiting a little bit longer. And I said, "I've seen you from the start. I would prefer to wait
Yeah. For you.
for you." So that's how the ball got rolling with the cochlear implant. And I started
Wow.
doing relentless research, following loads of people on Insta who had one as well. Um, and I really kind of like felt like there was hope. And I recently spoke about this on stage, about how just that hope that
Yeah.
there might be something for you.
Mm.
Um, so I remember going to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which is called University Hospitals now, meeting the team,
Mm.
and they showed me all the different cochlear implants, all the different brands. I went through a lot of the testing. It was like speech. I remember them playing all these different sentences, different
Mm.
sounds. I had an MRI done of my head. I remember I was very nervous about that.
Mm.
Had that done. I remember going to the appointment for the decision, and he said to me, "It's great news. We both sides are the same. You can choose which side you have it." Um, and then next thing you know, it was the kind of surgery, and I was really nervous. I don't do well with anesthetics, me, and I just felt so looked after, so cared for. I remember, I'm trying to remember what date. I think it was the 2nd of December. I might have had my surgery, and it was such a funny memory. I remember going to have they said, "Have a good meal before you come in." So I remember going to the village hotel with my husband, and I just had lots of food. And then I was first down to theatre the next morning. Recovery was hard.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, that's my story so
Oh,
far. I mean, I can tell you about the switch on and everything like that, but have you got anything? I feel like I've
yes.
talked
Oh
for
my gosh.
ages.
Kerry, that's like insane because obviously we've known each other for a bit of time now, but I still don't think I've realised everything that kind of went on in your journey. So thanks for being so honest and open about it because I think it really helps to paint a picture. And like for you to have been at secondary school going through that, I cannot imagine. Like I do feel kind of fortunate that my hearing loss happened. I suppose like if you can be grateful, but grateful that it wasn't like at school. It must be so hard. Like just starting secondary, like it's
I
been
know.
horrific.
I think it was, the 90s. So, there was a lot of disabilities wasn't really spoken about.
No,
I don't feel I got much support.
no,
I don't think teachers got much support about how to,
yeah,
I didn't really understand. I don't think the teachers really understand. I think they kind of did the best they could with what we
yeah,
had.
yeah,
But my switch on was, I think it was the 28th of December. It was a 2-day event. And even just hearing a high-pitched beep, I had not heard that for so long.
yeah,
Everything sounded very strange. It was a very exhausting process.
yeah,
Um, but to be able to hear something high-pitched, I can't remember ever, ever hearing that. I may have done when I was very, very young,
yeah,
before the mumps.
yeah.
I know you lost high pitch as well, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. It's sort of similar, really high frequencies. So, and I wonder if, because I know speaking to someone the other day about the kind of beeps and what I initially heard. So, I suppose as well, just to explain to anyone that doesn't know. So, when you've had your implant surgery, you wait about 3 or 4 weeks, don't you, usually? And then you get switched
Yeah.
on, is where they, once you've kind of recovered from surgery, and it's you get switched on and activated. And so a lot of people had said to me, you'll hear beeps, your brain probably won't process
Yeah.
what it is. And I know a lot of people have said that, and a lot of people that have had significant loss for a long period of time have said that they do hear beeps and their brain can't comprehend what it
Yeah.
is. So I think for both of us, we felt a lot of the time that there'd be things that we'd be going, what is that noise? And it would take a while to, like, especially for me, birds was the one thing that I would constantly be like, I literally could stand outside going,
Oh
what
my
is that?
God. I think I still do that now. It's so funny you mentioned that, because I remember my switch on day 1 and 2. I kept hearing these beeps and stuff like that. When I went home after day 1, I remember going in the living room, sitting down, and I could hear this clicking. Where's this coming from? Where's this click? And it was my husband was sat next to me pressing the sky remote, and I remember looking, going, "Wow, that
Stop
makes
making
a
noise.
sound! OMG!" And I remember going, "What's that? What's that?" And my dog, we've got wooden flooring downstairs. It was like a clacking sound, and I was just in amazement. And my kids were looking at me like, they were happy for me, but at the same time, they were looking at me like, "My God, we didn't realise you could never hear any of that stuff." That people
Yeah,
don't realise. And
totally.
I work in a high school in the day, and I remember going back after I think we went back in the January, and I remember the one day that we had like a training day. There was no children in. I remember walking across the playground, and I could hear this high pitched stuff. And where is that coming from? Because don't forget, sometimes I still don't have that sense of direction with sound. I
Mm,
can't really hear where something's coming from.
mhm.
And I've happened to say to one of the staff, "Can you hear that? What's that sound?" And she went, "Kerry, it's the birds." And I remember everybody I saw that day, I went, "I've heard the birds.
Yeah,
I can hear the
birds.
birds."
Yeah,
It was just amazing.
yeah, so mad. It is so funny, like the things you have taken for granted, isn't it? That people just think are the norm. And like you're saying, like the wooden floors. And I remember coming home and I distinctly remember it was only a couple of days after my switch on, and I sat at a table downstairs and I heard something and was like, and looked at my husband, and Lee was whistling, and I was like, "Are you whistling?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "I'm always whistling," but and he was like, "Oh God, you never normally can hear that." And I remember just like bursting into tears because I was like, "I've heard that for so long." He was like, "That's
Goodness.
amazing. Don't get upset." But it's all those
Honestly,
silly things, isn't it, that you forget.
it's amazing. And
Mhm.
and it's literally for those who are, you know, watching this podcast, whether you have hearing loss or you're thinking about having a cochlear implant, um, when I say it's amazing, it's like your heart skips a beat when you hear a sound for the first time, or um you discover a new sound. It's just, it's really, really hard to put into words, and it is very emotional. And I think
Yeah.
that it got to the point where after I had my implant, after I had it switched on and I was having these sounds, I kind of was scared to get excited about them. I was so scared. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is such good. And I'm scared to lose it. What if it fails? Or,
Yeah.
oh my God, what if I knock my head? What if something goes wrong and all this
Mhm.
sound is taken away from me? And I
Yeah.
wrote about this in my blog, which you can find on my website. Um, as a therapist, we call them intrusive thoughts. And that kind of consumed me for a bit. And
Mhm.
I really had to really try and, do some
Yeah.
self CBT, kind of
Yeah.
bring
On yourself. Yeah.
myself out of this. And
Yeah.
I had to think, I can't keep living my life in fear of what if. Um,
No.
I've been blessed with this amazing sound. And I just want to say for those that are watching this, I still struggle with speech sometimes. I still struggle in noisy situations. I still struggle with accents.
Mm.
I seem to be picking up I'm trying to think the best way to describe it. I'm picking up nature sounds better than I am speech.
Mm.
Like industrial sounds and stuff like that, like with the birds or a
Yeah.
car or whistling or something like that. Like I heard the ice cream van outside.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have heard that pre-cochlear implants. I wouldn't have
No.
known.
No.
That's quite a high-pitched tune.
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
think it doesn't like I remember somebody saying to me, bless them. I remember somebody saying to me, I bet you're so excited for Christmas, aren't you? Get your hearing back. And I was like, well, actually, hon, it kind of don't work like that. Right. It's not a cure. I'm not being given my
Yeah.
hearing back.
Yeah.
It's kind of a new way of sound, new way of hearing, a different
Mhm.
way.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's kind
It
of
is.
hard to explain to people who don't really understand. They think it's a
It is.
cure, you're magically fixed.
I know. Yeah, absolutely. Not the case. I know you're saying about that kind of worry of like having that and then the fear of like losing it. I last night I forgot to put my battery to my processor, but I forgot to put it on charge. So this morning when I got up, and I normally would put my ears on as I call them, and I was like, oh, flat. So like up until about, I mean, it took what a couple of hours to charge, but for that first part of this morning, I was just totally like, he feels totally lost. And I thought actually it's a really good reminder to be like, look at what you've got, look at what you know have have got access to now. Like you're so lucky, but yeah, I won't be doing that again.
My goodness. But it's that fear, isn't it? Oh, my batteries are dead. Oh my God. No sound. It's
Yeah,
hard. I mean, even
no,
packing for a trip, right? Have I got my batteries? Right. Have I got my charger? Have I
yeah,
got this? Have I got that? It's like we have to think about so many things.
yeah,
Even I have I remember saying to somebody at work, I have a fear that I wake up one day and all of a sudden my processor's not working.
yeah,
Oh my goodness, we need a
yeah.
policy in place for that. What are we going
Oh,
to do?
I know.
And she said to me, don't worry, you know,
Yeah,
if that happens, we can adapt. Or
mm,
you can you just have to not do many, because obviously in the day, I work in a high school and I see young people for therapy. Um, I'm not saying it's going to happen because for those who don't know, when you have a cochlear implant, you're given a big box of supplies, which includes, spare microphones, spare cables, and the team are pretty good. If you email them, they'll get you in for an appointment. But again, this is a fear that we
yeah,
have, because it's like if somebody can't see without their glasses and they break their glasses, I imagine that have
yeah.
the exact same fear. So I
Mhm.
think, it does help. I mean, I worked for myself for a very, very long time, but the high school that I'm at, I absolutely fell in love with the school. My children have gone there, and I I went there just to do martial arts for lunchtime, and I just fell in love with the place. And that was 2 years ago, and I love it. And I think going back into an environment where you have a manager after you've worked for yourself for a long time, it can be difficult for some, but
Mm,
my manager, she is amazing and she goes out of her way to make sure I've got reasonable adjustments. She checks in with me all the time. You know, have you got everything that you need? How are you getting on with your implant? Is there anything I can do? Wow, it makes it so much easier, you know, for
Absolutely.
me. So I
I think
spoke to her about that fear, and she
such a
said,
big
"Don't
adjustment,
worry."
isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard quite a few people who have said to me after having their CI, they've either changed jobs or had issues with managers because I think because some managers maybe think you get the implant and it's like switch on, hearing's restored, problem solved. Whereas people might have a great experience and can hear lots of things, but their brain's still overloaded, isn't it? And working overtime, and it might impact
Absolutely.
other things, make them extremely tired. So I think there's that side of things maybe people need more awareness and support with. I can't believe like how long you went without a referral. Do you think,
I
looking
know.
back, how like are you angry that you had to wait for so long, or?
I think that I think once I found out about this NHS cochlear implant program, the referral process, and everything like that, I did have some feelings of anger
Yeah.
and resentment, and I was like thinking, "Oh my goodness, all this time, um, I've missed out on so much." My children's first words, um, spending time with my friends, making memories. Like I spoke earlier on tonight about how it affected my mental health,
Mm.
but I'm such a person that is, I don't want to say that word positive, but I'm very, very careful what I give my energy to and what I spend my energy on.
Yeah.
And I was just so focused on the future and having this implant. And actually for the first time in my life, looking forward to, passion and purpose and finding out about who I am and what I want to be and having a goal. When I was a child, I wanted to be a police officer. You know, I could never have done that having a hearing loss. So I think that any feelings of anger I had, I let go of them very, very fast. And I
Yeah.
focused on, this new journey and a new identity for me, because I said earlier, I never ever used to identify as a deaf woman because I've never been around anyone who has hearing loss. I always, growing up, I thought deaf people just did sign language. I didn't
Mm.
know about anything. I was never given the opportunity to learn sign language.
No.
And it's incredibly expensive to learn. It's something I really want to do. So I think I never felt like I deserved to use that word deaf. But it wasn't until I lost my hearing completely fully that I started to have to accept. I had to say, Kerry, you are deaf, you know? And there's so many different types. There's people who were born deaf. There's people who lost their hearing as an adult, people who lost their hearing through an accident or something like that. Sometimes it's hereditary. Everybody communicates differently. I'm a lip reader. I don't sign. Somebody might sign, and it's just a massive spectrum. And I think, so even saying that I am a deaf woman, and partly why I've used the word deaf in the name for this podcast, because I think that we should really embrace our deafness. It looks different on everybody, right? Some people don't want to use that term, and that's perfectly okay. Some people say hard of hearing, hearing impaired, whatever you want to call it. I think that's there's power in that.
That's so true. 'Cause I remember you saying to me last time we spoke about tell me your deaf journey, and I thought, oh, but I feel a bit like that. Like I don't deserve to say I'm deaf because I still have got a little bit of residual hearing. So I feel like it'd be awful of me to say that to someone that is completely deaf and has no hearing whatsoever. But it's taking ownership of that superpower that we have, isn't it? And embracing it, because I used to feel like, oh, dare I say that? Am I deaf? Like, I think it's like a realization. I was in denial for so long of how bad my hearing loss was, and I've spoke to quite a few people that have said the same, and that have just especially those with gradual loss, because you just adapt over time, don't you? And adjust and think, oh, this is just what it's going to be like for me. And you don't really realize until they put that kind of hope in place. And I met an audiologist this week, actually, at the Cochlear Implant Conference in Newcastle. And she was the first audiologist that I saw throughout my assessment process that actually gave me some hope and made me think. And I felt so emotional when I saw her, just
Amazing.
because I thought you totally changed my life, and you probably don't realize you've changed my life because you were the first person to show me my graph and show me my audiogram and make sense of it to me, and move the steps forward. And yeah, afterwards I thought, I wonder why this hasn't happened before now, and like the power that ENT surgeons, ENT specialists, audiologists have, like they are in such an amazing position to help people, aren't they? And
Absolutely. That's amazing. I'm so glad that you got to see her.
yeah,
And that, I think, was it what day is it? When it's a bank holiday. I forget what the day it is. So on Friday, I went to the Boots Hearing Conference with Advanced Bionics, and there was lots of Boots hearing professionals there. It was an absolutely wonderful day. There was a phone app was there, different kind of hearing aid suppliers, and the audiologists had a lot of questions for Advanced Bionics and for me, what it was like having a cochlear implant. Some of them had already referred some of their patients through. We spoke about the Advanced Bionics mentoring,
yeah,
which a lot of them thought was amazing.
mm,
Some of them didn't know about that, others did.
yeah,
Um, I think that there's a massive gap of people who are working in private audiology clinics, NHS audiology clinics, who are not having those conversations with
yeah,
patients about cochlear implants.
yeah,
There could be various reasons. Maybe they're not feeling confident to have that
yeah,
conversation. Maybe they're not being supported. Maybe they don't really know that much about the criteria.
mm,
um Maybe it's a difficult conversation for them to have. They don't know how to put it to
yeah,
the client or the patient.
mm,
But whatever it is, I was one of those patients that experienced that, right?
yeah,
And I think that if there is a bit of hope, if you are an audiologist watching this, or you know someone that is, and there may be a little bit of hope for your patient. You think they might hit the criteria for cochlear implant, which has changed a lot now.
mm,
10 years ago, the criteria was completely different.
yeah,
There's a lot more, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? The criteria is completely different now. Please talk to your patient about it.
yeah,
Get in touch with Advanced Bionics or, the hospital. If you need support to have those conversations,
mm.
reach out to your manager because it could change somebody's life.
Oh, 100%,
Yeah.
100%. And obviously, you being an AB community mentor as well, what does that mean to you to be able to give back and like the community?
Wow. I swear, it's, I spoke about this at the conference as well. Um, I didn't know when I went through my cochlear implant journey, I didn't know about the AB mentors then. And I really could have done with asking some questions to someone who had a cochlear implant. Things like, you know, um, can I still train martial arts? How is it like for you in the gym? Do you get headaches, or how do you brush your hair? How do you style your hair? Does it fall off? Questions that I couldn't ask, even though the hospital team, they were amazing. Real recognizes real. I wanted to speak to a real person that had one.
Mm,
So when I remember having an email about, I had an email from Catherine. I think she'd been given my details from the hospital, and she told me about this community. Do you know when you think like, wow, this exists? Why have I not known about this before? I need this kind of thing in my life. And I remember she told me all about it, and she asked me whether I'd love to be a part of it. And I thought, I'd love to become that person I needed. Please ask me all those questions that you want. You know, I think being a therapist as well, I'm very, very good at listening to people. And sometimes people really, really need that. I think going through the cochlear implant process, it affects you mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It changes your identity. And it's so important, I feel, to have that support. That's where we come in as AB mentors. But the first time I met the team was on an online Zoom, which was hosted by Catherine. We were introduced, we played a little quiz game. It was just amazing. People were talking, sharing about their story. And then um, last year in October, we all met in person, and I I remember I was very nervous. Traveling when you have hearing loss can be very scary. I can't hear the train announcements very well. I was traveling to Manchester, didn't want to drive because I don't feel confident sometimes driving all that way. What if I would make a wrong turn and I end up somewhere, a field in Scotland? That would happen to me, okay? That would. So I remember I was excited, nervous, got the train there, and I remember putting my stuff away in the hotel, and we was asked to meet for like coffee and drinks before we went in, and it's just being there and clocking everyone. God, they've got a cochlear implant. They've got a cochlear implant. I'm thinking I belong here. And I remember we had like a day's like networking and training, and on the evening we all had to meet for like pre-drinks before our meal. And I remember I was thinking, oh, noisy situation. But I remember walking through and everybody was there dressed up, but I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to apologize for getting them to repeat themselves. Everybody knew, we all got each other, and I think that's the first time I've really kind of felt like I've belonged with with a group. Um, and I met you, and we've just clicked straight away. And I think that when when you've navigated the journey have had, belonging is so important. Having people that understand you and a place where you feel, "Oh, this is effortless. I can just really, really be myself." It's just amazing.
You're so right about your identity. It is a whole new identity, isn't it? And I haven't really thought about it like that before, but it absolutely is. And that new journey that we're on. And unless you've had a CI, like I always say to people, like it'd be great if you could say to someone for a day, like just try it. If you've got
Yeah.
hearing loss or you're deaf, try it and see how you get on because it is a really special community there. Absolutely,
Yeah, they're amazing. I love the
really.
fact that they have all ages, all experiences. And I think that it's so wonderful for because everyone who is a potential candidate to have a cochlear implant. They're all ages. We have parents who are going through the process for their child. We have people in their 70s who once thought they were too old to have one,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that the fact that they can match people up with a mentor, you know, who they can really, really relate to is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And obviously, in spirit of this week is Deaf Awareness Week.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would like to put out, a message to anyone, top tips for anyone looking into anything hearing loss or deaf related?
Well, funny you should say that because I've spent this afternoon recording some content for my Instagram of tips, so I will share some. Oh, I think a really important one is if you're somebody who hosts meetings or trainings, whether that be a meeting with a parent at a school or you run in a training event, always ask if there's any reasonable adjustments you need to make. And that's not just for those of us who have hearing loss, it's for everyone,
Mm,
right? A simple something really meant a lot to me. Last week I had to go over to another school in our trust, and I was a bit nervous. You know, it was a drive where I've never been, but the person who was scheduling the meeting emailed me and said, really looking forward to seeing you, Kerry. Is there any reasonable adjustments, or how can I make any adaptations so you can, so it's accessible for you? And I emailed back and I said, that really meant a lot to me. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
So I think little things like that mean all the difference.
yeah,
Um, Captioning your social media, that's a really important one. If you're somebody that creates posts on Instagram, TikTok, please caption your content. There's a lot of people out there who are deaf, who have hearing loss. And if it's not captioned, I'm scrolling right past it. All right,
yeah,
bye.
yeah,
And there's
yeah,
also, you know, people who don't have hearing loss, they watch their phones with the volume off. I'm trying to
yeah.
think of any others.
Good
I
ones.
think, can you think of any? Can you
I
think
think
of any?
the only one I've come across recently was a lovely lady at work said to me, "Oh, do you mind me asking questions about it, or do you mind me asking?" And I think it's people not being afraid to ask questions and to
Yeah,
say, "Can I ask you how? Can I do anything to help?" And not to
yeah,
be embarrassed about talking about it. Because so many people have hearing loss and issues with their hearing, isn't it? Considering hidden disability is something like 1 in 5 people have. I think the stats are something like that, which is
yeah. I
huge,
think it
isn't it?
is. That's madness, isn't it?
Yeah,
And I think you're so right. You know, encouraging people to ask. I've been out and I've seen children pointing to my implant. And you know, I know not everybody welcomes questions and stuff like that, right? But asking it if it's okay to ask, I think that's great.
yeah,
One thing that really stood out to me is like feeling included.
mm,
There's been lots of times where I've been places, maybe could be like meetings or briefings, and I always go in and think, where's best to position myself, where I can hear everything, I can see everything. And
yeah,
sometimes I'm in briefings and um, I'm sat there and the main speaker's talking at the front. I can hear them. But then someone stands up at the back and shares info. Someone down that, and I'm like, oh my God, which way do I go? Now, okay, it may not be information that's relevant to me, but I still want to belong
yeah,
and I still want to feel included. I remember
yeah,
some time ago, it was a couple of months ago, I was at this training and there was groups of us on the table. I told the trainer that I was deaf. Um, and I remember there was something we had to watch on the screen, and people around me were chuckling and really getting engrossed in this. And I was sat there and it had no captions, right? And I remember sitting there, and it had been a day which was quite testing. And I remember looking around and thinking, these people around me are finding this funny. And I felt left out. I felt like really small. It made me feel so uncomfortable. And I
mm,
can't, it's really strange for me because I'm not very an emotional person, but I found myself getting a little bit upset. And I don't know if you do this, but if I'm in a situation where I can't hear or something's going on, I start looking around me to see if I can read the room of what's going on.
yeah.
And I think, do you do that, Charlotte?
Read the room.
It's a kind of skill, isn't it, that we've developed, right? All right, and assess the situation to what's going on.
Yeah,
And so I thought, we're only at the start of this training now. Oh my God, what if the entire thing is not captioned? So I got up and I went to the event host and I said, I'm going to have to leave this training. I said, it's not accessible for me. And I left.
mhm,
And I just felt like after, oh, maybe I should have handled that differently. But I thought, rather than start crying right there, which is
yeah,
not like me,
no,
but at the end of the day, I'm human. And I think that we don't realize just how resilient and strong we are. And it's okay sometimes to get upset. It's okay to think I'm getting overwhelmed here. I need to remove myself. But you know what? Sometimes I think it was not the trainer's fault, and I gave feedback after, and I said, this is why this happened. Captions really need to be on your content so I can feel included and others. And they said, we will do better next time. And I think that's how places learn. You know, I know that when I've run meetings or training, I always ask for feedback after. How can I be more accessible? How can I make this better? And even as a business, we've had martial arts schools for 15 years. And, you know, customers' opinion is important. How can we improve? So I think that that's a really good one to put out for Deaf Awareness Week if you're a business or you're community facing, or even, you know, the doctors. That's really, really difficult. I don't know if you have had any experience there with like the doctors ringing you and
My favorite. Who was I talking to the other day? And they said it was a few years ago, and I think they were starting the cochlear implant assessment process. And they said I was sat in the audiology department, and they said they all had masks on because it was just when COVID was about, or just after COVID. And they said they had masks on. They were coming out shouting names, and then they must have shouted this person's name a few times, and then finally they said, "Oh, sorry, that's me." And they were like, "I've been shouting for ages, and like you're in an audiology department, mask on, I can't hear you." Like, so now when they go to this this audiology department, there's screens up and the name flashes up, and just simple things like that. That technology nowadays, I mean,
you know that I call that the doctor's waiting room fear, right? You sat there like, right, am I going to miss my appointment? Are they going to call? No, it's on my records, deaf. Okay, right. I'll go to the receptionist and say, I'm here for my appointment. I just want to let you know and remind you that I'm deaf. Can you please tell the doctor to come outside for me? Because the screens are not always working. Do you know, there's been many a times I've sat there and I've been there half an hour, 40 minutes, and I've gone up to reception and gone, do you have any idea how long? And they've already called me. And I remember the once, this was before I had my cochlear implant, saying to the doctor, how is this accessible for me? They keep phoning me. I have to phone up. You know, I can't do that. I can't use the telephone, and I'm sorry, I cannot get my son to assist me ringing for intimate results or booking a smear test, or sometimes my children used to assist me on the phone, but it's not accessible. So I remember them saying, well, what you'll have to do is you'll have to come down. You'll have to come down to us and you'll have to get here for 8 in the morning and try and get an appointment. Okay, right, I'll work. There's no guaranteed chance I might get an appointment. I remember doing that the one day, and then some doctor surgeries have hearing loops. And I remember thinking, this loop isn't working. And I said to the person behind the desk, is that loop working? What's the loop? That connects the hearing aids for deaf people. Oh, I don't know. I said, well, can you, it really helps me. Can you try and get someone? And they didn't know what it was or what it was there for. And I think that kind of stuff, it's from the top, isn't it? They need to be implementing that stuff for their staff, for their training. I think only now, I'd say a couple of months ago, my doctors have implemented an online booking system, which is a lot better. It's accessible. And then, but still, you have to book a telephone. You can't get face to face.
Yeah.
Can't make it up.
I know. It's crazy. I remember that fear, especially I think just after COVID had hit and it was terrifying. Like, I hated going anywhere by myself because I would just be like total guesswork, like that. Oh, feeling like all hot and bothered, like, oh, going to embarrass myself, and just awful, isn't it? Like, oh,
that's awful. That fear. And it's like, I can't describe that fear, but I know exactly what it feels like. The fear of looking stupid, the fear of being a burden. I remember before my cochlear implant surgery, I used to teach our ladies kickboxing program 2 to 3 nights a week, and I did absolutely flourish with that because I built up a massive team and they knew me very well. And we used to put little things in place like hand gestures and things like that. It was very accessible environment I kind of created for myself. Everybody that come in for a kickboxing lesson, I used to tell them I was deaf and so on. But what used to really frighten me is that I sometimes used to lock up that I used to lock up our martial arts school
Yeah.
overnight when it was dark, and we're in an area where there's not many, it's quite dark, there's not many street lights. And I remember saying to my husband, I don't like locking up overnight. And he'd go, you're a black belt, Kerry. You want about? You're a badass. And I'd be like, but I wouldn't hear him coming. I wouldn't
No.
hear anybody coming behind me. I don't think you understand. And when I went through the cochlear implant process, I remember the lady saying to me, obviously, you do know that it's not going to give you your hearing back fully. It's you got to have realistic expectations. You know that they were really good like that. And I
Yeah.
said, if I could just hear somebody behind me, that would be massive. You know, like walking. Yeah, I don't walk many places on my own. I've always been a woman who I know I have to keep myself safe. And as a deaf woman, we have to keep ourselves even more safe because we can't really hear very well either.
Yeah.
So I think I can hear that now.
Yeah.
If I remember locking up the academy a couple of months ago and I could hear somebody's footsteps walking there. So I think that's a massive thing for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't
Um,
realize how vulnerable you feel actually. Um,
yeah,
Here it's everything, isn't it, in terms of that, and it's your own personal safety, isn't it? And
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
it is.
so,
It's crazy when you look back of all like
I know.
I mean, a question somebody asked me um quite recently was what are the you speak a lot about the positives, but what about the negatives? What about the downsides to having a cochlear implant? And I actually felt like saying, not many, let you know if I find one. But actually, there hasn't been, I think, and that's because of the way we look at it, what we've been through, and
Mm,
how much losing our hearing cost us mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Then I don't feel that there's any negatives to this surgery that I've had. You
no,
know, okay, my head has changed a bit of a different shape. I can feel it. I have to charge my implant. But to me, I'm happy to do that,
yeah,
just for that sound, that
yeah,
it's
yeah.
amazing.
It is. I met someone the other day who said to me, "I'm not very good at remembering to like charge stuff." I can talk, kind of. Last night, they were saying, "I'm worried I won't be able to, I'd forget my kit," and I was like, "Trust me, when the kit works like it does, you will remember. You will remember
I
to look
know.
at it, charge it."
I'm like, I don't know if you've got my cochlear implant come with a beautiful white case. A
Yes, yes,
lovely white case. Have you got that white case?
yeah,
That comes
yeah,
everywhere with me.
yeah,
Um, I'll tell you something, going to the hairdressers, I am very lucky that I've had the same hairdresser now for probably about 8 years. And before that, I used to feel so
mm,
if there's any hairdressers watching, this is great for you guys to listen to. It's so hard going to the hairdressers and taking off your ears and trying to communicate, trying to lip read. It's really hard. It's something I used to really fear.
yeah,
But I was very lucky to find a hairdresser who really listened to me. She went out of her way to adapt things for me. We kind of developed our own kind of like signals and sign language, and she's Scottish, so it's so hard to lip read,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
I have this really good app on my phone, which I often use. I can't remember the name of the app, but you press it and the person speaks into it and it transcribes what they say. And I still use that now. I was in the hairdressers last week, I still used it. But one thing I was worried about was having my hair washed. I think she was also a little worried. I'm her first client who's had cochlear implant surgery. And she kept saying to me, I remember, where's the scar going to be? And I said, I think it's going to be like kind of like behind my ear. But when I went back, my first appointment after having my surgery, I remember she was so careful with me. I said, here's like where it is. That's one thing I was a little bit worried about. But now she just washes my hair normal and it's just nothing. Like I put my case on the side, she's like, right, take your implant out. It's just become the norm.
It
And I
does,
think
yeah.
she's also learnt a lot about it as well.
Absolutely. A few people have asked me that question recently, actually, about but what happens when you go to the hairdressers? And I think that's if you're comfortable with somebody and they've asked you the questions and
Yeah.
they just adapt to you. And, it doesn't have to be a scary or negative experience. It can be
Yeah.
absolutely fine. And I feel the same. I think I'm really lucky with my hairdresser, Hannah. She's just very patient. I'm able to lip read her really quite well. And if I do ask her to repeat herself, she's great. She doesn't make me feel,
Yeah.
and she knows as soon as the hairdryer goes on, I'm like, no chance.
Same.
I'm not being
So
rude.
funny. But for anybody watching who has a fear of going to the hairdressers, right? I think that even just speaking to speaking to your hairdresser and saying, this is how I feel. How can we come up with something that we both understand? Or, sometimes I think I've had to remind myself that people cannot mind read. Yeah. Sometimes unless we say, look, I'm deaf, I struggle with this. Even coming to this hair salon's a big thing for me today, you know you'll find that people are more kinder and helpful than you think, and they normally say, how can I make this a better experience for you? I think there's been several things lately, like when I want to book somewhere for a meal, not everywhere has an online booking system. And sometimes there's a lovely vineyard not far from where I live, and they do lovely home cooked food. And I remember going on there to book. You can't, it's telephone to book. And I'm like, right, okay, how am I going to do this? So I messaged him on the social media and I said, here's my dilemma.
Yeah,
I want to book with you, but it's not accessible to me. What can we do? And they went out of their way to
yeah,
go, right, Kerry, give me your email. We're going to call, we're going to communicate with you over email. And we got it sorted. Brilliant. I think years ago, I'd have been kind of scared to ask because I didn't want to feel like a burden. But
yeah.
now I feel, right, these people don't know. If I advocate for myself, they're going to learn something too. So the next deaf person or hard of hearing person that comes through to them,
Yeah.
it's going to be an easier process for them. Or it might encourage them to change and put an online booking system in place, something that's accessible. So I always think about that too when I'm advocating for myself. I'm helping that next person.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I think
Yeah,
that's important just to keep having these conversations, because if people don't know, they don't know. And if we
yeah,
can help one person and they help another person, then the world's going to be a better place for it.
absolutely. Me and my CI bestie, we're changing the world, one step at a time.
I know, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your story tonight, Kerry. It was amazing to hear and
Thank
quite
you.
incredible everything you've gone through. It really is. So I think you're amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. I think you're amazing too. And thank you so much for your amazing questions and allowing me to share my story. I think that it's really important that, you know, when we're going through this, that we talk honestly from the heart. I don't think as a therapist myself who works in mental health, I don't think enough is spoken about how hearing loss affects our mental health. And I think I'm hopefully going to use this podcast platform to talk more about that and, share our real feelings. And like I said to my listeners as well, I've been putting off launching this podcast for so long, and that's because I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted the caption to be perfect. But I think I know what I want to see. I want to see real people having real conversations about things I can relate to, like hearing loss, mental health. So I'm really hoping that you guys have enjoyed our session today, and I hope that you've enjoyed hearing about my journey. If you want to know any more, yeah, please comment on the YouTube comments. My Instagram is the Martial Arts Therapist. Please reach out. Take care. Bye, guys. Thanks for watching.
Bye.